The Rings of Power is a $1 billion fanfic. Yep, there, I said it. Unpopular opinion, I know, but it is. Okay, hear me out. We've got these flawless characters doing badass things that make them untouchable and way more important than they need to be. People showing up in stories when they shouldn't, just so that we can have a bunch of popular characters all interact together. It also has a completely made-up character who gets to interact with our favorite ones and is just so important to the plot. And a bunch of made-up history because the showrunners didn't have the rights to the original materials, don't understand the books very well, and then just decided it was too much work and made up their own stuff. Right? That's a fanfic. Or am I crazy and missing something? So saddle up and hold on tight, because this professor and film director is going to get to the bottom of how Amazon got tricked into funding a $1 billion fanfic. It's 2017, and the Tolkien estate is not happy with Netflix and HBO pitching them ideas, one of which is a Christian-heavy Gandalf adventure story. But then Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne, two screenwriters who haven't sold anything in 10 years, are just somehow smart enough to get Amazon to back their crazy idea of a story based on the forging of the rings. That must have been the greatest boardroom pitch in history.
Dude, elevator pitch me.
And I can see why they succeeded. A show telling the story of the forging of the rings is honestly a cool idea. I mean, the entire trilogy is based on the aftermath of these rings. The books are named after the rings, and the idea of seeing our big baddie Sauron be the catalyst for all this is really exciting. He's described as this attractive but deceitful character named Anatar, bringer of gifts, who tricks the elfsmiths into making all those rings. That sounds like a pretty cool prologue, something that we only glimpsed in the video game series Shadow of Mordor, and I really enjoyed playing that game. Okay, but why didn't we get any of that? I really liked Lord of the Rings, but I fell asleep reading the Silmarillion multiple times, and I fell asleep watching this show on the first episode. Don't get me wrong, this show does a lot of things right. The CG isn't too terrible, the cinematography is beautiful even if it looks like a perfume commercial at times, and the casting is pretty on point. But where it all falls apart is the story. The pacing, character development, dialogue, plot, narrative thread is just incredibly weak. Apparently Peter Jackson was supposed to give notes on the final script, and he never got it. This entire show breaks the cardinal rule of good writing, which is show, not tell. So why, with a budget of nearly $90 million per episode, did no one step in and tell these two to stop telling and just show the story? Why is the pacing so painfully slow? Why do characters have no depth and are all boring? Why is Galadriel the showrunner's best girl and so powerful, but rude all the time, even though she's old and she's supposed to be wise? Why is he here? Why are any of these people here? And why is Sauron this made-up, vanilla, bland human character instead of the Sephiroth-looking elf who's way cooler? As I was watching the series, I was like, I swear to Arulu Vatar that if this guy turns out to be Sauron, I'm gonna be so pissed. Okay, writers. That's where we're going with this. All right. Why do writers these days have such an obsession with trying to make villains these humble, relatable, empathetic characters? Just make them evil, but give them a solid motivation. Look at this guy. He's a jerk. He's a bomb waiting to go off. And yet, we like him because a villain with present-day personality is far better than a villain with some silly backstory. I think most of my beef is with these two characters. These two are great. I'm leaving them alone because they're the only two who made me actually feel anything in this show. I don't care about these two, or these four, or any of these people. The problem is Galadriel and Halbrand make up about a third of the show, and they are just the weakest characters. You see, when you write a good character, you have to give them a few basic things to give them depth. Things like fears and motivations and flaws. Do they grow over time? Do they learn from their mistakes? How do they respond to criticism, failure, defeat, and loss? Galadriel is so incredibly unlikable because she is one-dimensional, and she behaves unfitting for an elf ruler her age and rank. She doesn't use her wisdom to teach, but she just flaunts her experience and wails on people lesser than her. She loses her brother, and you think that she'd be sensitive to death, but she doesn't even bat an eye when these people die, or these people die, or when the entire elf race is in danger. And I'm not saying that you can't completely rewrite an entire story and make buku bucks from it, or make it work, but you have to have a good story. All these fanfics follow the same stupid formula. A seemingly bland, self-insert character gets to meet the book's super important characters and go on adventures with them, and be important to them, and have a stake in the final conflict, every reader's fantasy. And the super important characters are just so much cooler than the original books because our super fan brains see them with rose-colored glasses. And every writer knows that if you can't kill your darlings, you're gonna end up with your first draft crap. And that's Halbrand. He's our fanfic golden boy who gets to be Sauron at the end and wants to hook up with Galadriel. It's just a mess. Another thing that I was confused about was the performance of this actor in the first couple of episodes, and only later did I find out that this actor didn't even know that he was playing Sauron until the third episode. This creates all sorts of direction problems, such as how are you supposed to be able to communicate with your actor to tell them to portray a certain person when they think that they are playing a completely different character? This guy probably thought he was just Halbrand, a normal human being who meets Galadriel, and not Sauron, the dark apprentice of Melkor and extreme murderer. Those are two completely different mindsets. Look, I know the writers had a lot of events to cover between the Silmarillion and the OG trilogy, but the showrunners seem to not understand Tolkien's characters at all. Everyone who reads the book knows that Sauron once went by the name Anatar. You can Wikipedia that. He made himself look attractive, and he slipped into the elf-smith ranks and showed them how to forge the Rings of Power. Galadriel, Elrond, and Celebrimbor didn't trust him, but after a couple hundred years, they make all of these rings, and then Anatar sneaks off to make the One Ring, thinking he's going to enslave all of them, only to find out that he's screwed up and it only works on humans, not the dwarves or the elves. So then the elves realize they've been deceived and they have to brace themselves for a war against Sauron. It's actually really funny and endearing to watch this hardcore, murderous villain like Sauron screw up over and over. Like, he gets his butt kicked by this awesome lady who has a wolfhound, and then he messes up this 200-year plan with the rings. He's pure evil, but he's so flawed that you like watching him. And, you know, you kind of feel bad for him sometimes. Can you imagine the first season just watching this beautiful elf that you know is evil? In each episode, you're just like, any minute now, but why does he have to be so charismatic and charming? Like, why do I like him? House of the Dragon is really nailing this. I mean, have you seen this guy? But no, we get Halbrand, who has no personality, doesn't actually do anything evil in the show except lie to Galadriel, which she stupidly believes for no reason, so maybe that's her fault. We don't see him sneaking around, being deceitful, setting everyone up for backstabbing or murder. There's no anticipation of betrayal, no stakes, no sense of payoff. And I think these writers just don't understand that you can have a character be the obvious villain the entire time and still enjoy the payoff at the end when the villain's true motives are revealed to the heroes. You don't need to trick the audience because we're not stupid. For being the center of the entire show, it's strange to me that the forging of the rings just happens. I mean, it's so uneventful. Okay, so side story. Did you know that in the original Star Wars A New Hope, the Death Star was just floating in space and the rebels went to go blow it up? It wasn't threatening anyone, it was just chilling in space, and the rebels came to get rid of it. Thankfully, editor Marsha Lucas had proper storytelling sense and realized that this is boring, and it made the rebels look like murderers, so she edited it to make it look like the Death Star was coming to kill the rebels. Now we have stakes and urgency and chaos and consequences if something goes wrong, but we don't have any of this in Rings of Power. If you haven't read Snyder Save the Cat, he goes into how you can pace a story and have all that juicy payoff at the end. McKay and Payne should have read this. It's only $15 on Amazon. Wait, Amazon? You could have gotten this for free? Anyway, so you have to lead to a payoff, and the forging scene just doesn't get there. Celebrimbor just casually tells Galadriel to sacrifice her brother's dagger, so she's not even offering up that idea herself. Like, wouldn't it show some character growth if she did that? If she set aside some selfishness for a greater good and let go of her brother's ghost? But no, this guy's like, hey, is that some Valinor metal over there I could use? And because we never saw the elf race dying from this corruption, there's no urgency to the forging. Like, if you're gonna introduce something as stupid as the corruption that can only be cured by mithril, at least make this moment feel critical. Throw in some epic forging montage with a whole bunch of elves who are dying waiting around for this moment, not this slow, dreamy, beautiful nonsense. Give me some OG trilogy vocals, make it epic, make me feel something. Have Anatar sneak off to forge the One Ring in Mordor and turn into Sauron and end the season on a cliffhanger. Make the last shot of him putting on the One Ring and then just cut to black. Give audiences something to be pumped about for season 2. But no, we don't get any of that. They say you can tell if a director knows what they're doing by the first and last shot of a film, so we just talked about the last shot, so now let's look at the first shot. Let's look at Peter Jackson's. He gives us everything that we need to know in 6 minutes. What are the rings? Where are we? Who's the baddie? How did he get defeated? Why is the ring bad? And how do we get to present day? The Rings of Power tries, and they just completely fail. So we start by talking about Morgoth, who isn't the baddie of this show, and we talk about him, we don't show. Off to a great start. And then we talk about leaving Valinor, which has nothing to do with the show. And then we're told there's centuries of destruction and death. And then we cut to these beautiful, highly populated cities. We're told Morgoth is defeated, but we don't see it. And then we get to Sauron, who's supposed to be the baddie of the show. And this is the only cool shot of the opening. But there's a problem with this because he's just standing there. We're not sure why he's the villain. Has he done anything bad yet? Has he murdered somebody? Because he just supported Morgoth, he's evil, so it's just by association? Like, we need to see this guy kill some people. He clearly doesn't have a problem with that, and Peter Jackson shows us. Because if we don't see that, we can't acknowledge how dangerous he is. And therefore, once we find out he's Sauron, we're not going to take him seriously if all he ever did was just stand around and lie. So this version of Sauron is far more scary than this one. Look, if you're gonna write a fanfic, at least go nuts and make it entertaining. As for the rest of the show, I think people are 100% allowed to nitpick and complain. Because let's not forget that this show has a budget of $715 million. With financing like that, this show should be flawless. So overall, if I had to give it a grade, I would give it a B- as a professor and like a C- as a director. The crew is talented, and it's not a completely terrible show. There's a complete product, there's decent visuals and good sound design, there's okay casting, and a mostly workable story. It's not mind-blowing, but it's also not such a terrible book adaptation. But as a director, I can't ignore how terrible these character arcs are, the silly plot ideas, and the constant telling not showing. So C-. At the end of the day, that's all you can expect of a fanfic. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please comment below on another movie that you would like me to review, and give a grade. And if you think you can make something better than Rings of Power, then head over to my channel. There's plenty of video tutorials so that you can get a film education for free. Alright, that's it for this one. See you later.